Good afternoon and welcome to the National Museum of the American Indians conversation about these changing times. Today, our conversation is going to be focusing on the grassroots response to COVID-19 on the Navajo and Hopi Reservation. Today, I am joined by an amazing young woman, Shondine Herrera. Shondine is a citizen of the Navajo Nation. She's a recent Duke University graduate and is applying to law school. She's also providing relief to some of the most vulnerable citizens on the Navajo Nation. The Navajo Nation is one of the largest reservations in the United States. And during these uncertain times and challenges, Shondine has found so much encouragement through the work that she is doing. Her story today is just one of hundreds of thousands of Navajo stories, which make up our country's collective COVID-19 story. Today, we're going to explore what is happening on the ground in Navajo Nation and Hopi, but we're also going to be looking at how these racial inequalities are impacting Navajo Nation to having one of the highest infection rates per capita. Today, as Shondine and I gather, I would like to gratefully acknowledge the Native people on whose ancestral homelands we gather today, as well as the diverse and vibrant Native communities who make their home here today. I've had the opportunity to interview Shondine before in our NMAI's series, Youth in Action, Conversations About Our Future, where we dove deeper into the topic of Native civic engagement and the importance of it in rural communities as well as urban settings. But a lot has changed since August when we last spoke. So I would like for Shondine to introduce herself to our audience today.
Hello, Yat Shondine Herrera Unishia. Touching initially now kaif bahe bashishin but any dashiche now kaif bahe dashinella. Ahot ao a denet initially. Aro tsebian sky de nasha. Hello, everybody. My name is Shondine Herrera. I'm a citizen of the Navajo Nation, and I currently reside in Monument Valley, Utah, where I am working. I am doing a 2-year fellowship with the Lead for America Hometown Fellowship, which is an amazing organization and helped me pave my way back home to work in my community.
I'm so excited to have this opportunity to share a little bit more of the work that you have been doing on Navajo, but how it's changed over time as well. But to get us started, I would love for you to tell me a little bit more about the Navajo and Hopi Family COVID-19 Relief Fund. What is it?
Sure. So the Navajo and Hopi Families COVID Relief Fund started back in March when our founder, Ethel Branch, former Attorney General of the Navajo Nation, felt the need and took the initiative to create a GoFundMe to raise money so that volunteers here on Navajo and Hopi could begin purchasing 2 weeks worth of food and supplies for elders and immunocompromised because we saw quickly how COVID reached our nation and spread like wildfire. And we just felt very concerned for our elders and our multi-generational households, our immunocompromised, and how difficult it will be to get food and supplies, especially when we are already living in a food desert. There are only 13 grocery stores on the entire Navajo Nation, which has a land base equivalent to West Virginia. And so Ethel took the initiative and started a GoFundMe. Within 2 days, it had raised $50,000, and we found ourselves super busy recruiting volunteers, creating a hotline and email. Folks could reach out to us on to request what we're calling a kinship package. And so we've been operating since the beginning of March and have grown tremendously. This is an initiative of Yeha Onido, which is a nonprofit we also helped start back in March. And so the goal is really to flatten the goal is to flatten the curve on the Navajo Nation and Hopi, and help our community members stay home and stay safe, while also providing, healthy nutritional foods. We spend about $100 or so on each kinship box. So it is enough food to last a family 2 weeks, so they don't have to travel off the reservation to do grocery shopping. We also include cleaning supplies and PPE. And so we're really just trying to show up for our people in a way that is really necessary right now.
Thank you for sharing that. There's a lot of information packed into that, but one thing that really stood out to me was mentioning how in just short amount of time, in 2 days, how much money was raised and how quickly this grassroots movement came to be. I want to know, you talked a little bit about why there is a need for this, but I would like to know a little bit more. Why is there even a need for grassroots movements in this region? This is all so wild. It's crazy to think about.
Right. And, I think that the gap that we're seeing here on the ground is, in the beginning, it took a significant amount of time for, our tribal government to receive CARES Act funding. And so we just felt, as a leadership team with the relief effort, there is a big need for, grassroots, Indigenous-led movements right now, because as we saw with the Navajo Nation, it took a significant amount of time for CARES Act funding to reach our nation. And in that time, we had community members who had no food, didn't have a vehicle to go out and do grocery shopping. Like our people needed immediate assistance. And I think that's a really great thing about our relief effort is our response rate. We had folks who would request a care package because their family's in quarantine and they don't want to risk going out and exposing others, or they are literally on their last meal. They don't have any supplies left. And we're able to mobilize volunteers on the ground, sometimes even within 24 hours, to get that family assistance. And so, this is an effort that we're planning and working on implementing long-term, even past COVID, because our communities are still going to need assistance. And more broadly, we're working on addressing other injustices in our communities and other shortcomings where our people really just need more guidance and assistance, and just working all together to rebuild our community. So, in the future, we're not one of the most vulnerable populations when it comes to diseases and illnesses that come our way.
Yeah, I hear a lot of talk about the future, right? There's so many things that are uncertain in this time of COVID-19 rolling into 2020, and we're nearing the end of this year. And I would like to know a little bit more about what is the vision for Navajo Nation and Hopi Family COVID Relief Fund. What happens after COVID?
So, we're about a good 8 months in now and have raised over $6 million. Every week we have numerous distributions going on, spending anywhere from $100,000 to $200,000 on direct relief, so purchasing food and supplies. And so we have definitely been busy and have remained so, but going forward, we're definitely thinking about how we're going to continue this work beyond COVID. And so thinking about transforming in our distribution sites into food pantries. Food security is a huge issue on Navajo. And though some communities do have, monthly food banks or other ways to obtain necessary means, there is no such thing as, a soup kitchen or a food pantry in many communities, especially rural communities like Monument Valley, where I reside. And so, we're thinking bigger picture, introducing food pantries, community centers to help, our community members in other ways, whether that be providing services to help local businesses, providing a center to access reliable broadband and Wi-Fi connection, and really just, bringing ideas back in and bringing this sense of self-sufficiency that we're working so hard to encourage within our own organization. And, even our approach to building our programs, recruiting local people, people who know their communities best, and just introduce, projects. Right now we have a Diné Vote project. So we've been doing projects to get out the vote, providing food at different early voting sites, as well as doing voter registration and partnering with other organizations like the Rural Utah Project to identify areas that more Navajos need assistance with understanding where they need to go to vote, how to register. And so the past few weeks, we've also been really invested in doing some Diné voter projects. And so going forward, just working on rolling out more projects in our communities.
I hear a bright future for the Navajo and Hopi Family COVID Relief Fund. It seems that you guys are on the trajectory to really identify many of the issues, some that have been around for such a long time, but also some of the newer issues and some of the more contemporary conversations that are even happening in our country today. We do have the COVID-19 pandemic, but we are also seeing another pandemic, another issue going on at the exact same time, and that's racial inequalities. So what I want to know is, how has COVID-19 really highlighted or magnified the racial inequalities on Navajo and Hopi?
Yeah, I mean, when you think about the reasons why, Navajo and Hopi have been so vulnerable during COVID-19, stems from the systemic issues we've experienced and the challenges that are ongoing in our communities. So take water, for instance. Water security is a huge issue here. A lot of our households don't have running water or potable water. We still have to go to local wells to haul. And so when you think about that and how important it is to wash your hands as often as possible during this pandemic, that's not possible for a lot of people on the nation. And if you think about why we're in this situation where water is hard to access, it stems back to uranium mining. Definitely in my area, Monument Valley, uranium mining was a huge thing, and there's something like over 300 uranium mines that have not been properly cleaned up, that have since, contaminated our water. And so when you think about the bridge between uranium mining and water and the current pandemic, it all goes back to environmental racism, really. And so that is like my way of thinking and approaching the work that we're doing, is also addressing these historical injustices that have made it so our nation, has been so vulnerable to COVID-19.
Right. I think I think what we're seeing a lot during this time is exactly that. These links to historical events that have brought us to this point where everything is just exponential at this point. So seeing how successful Navajo and Hopi Family COVID Relief has been with being able to immediately be on the ground and providing basics, PPE, food, water, how has it become a model for other nations? Have there been dialogue between other vulnerable communities?
Yeah, and I think that's, one of the really great things about our organization is we're easily accessible. Each of our volunteers and staff of Yeha'onito are constantly speaking on panels like this, having conversation, opening up dialogue to discuss the ways in which we have been successful in our approach, but also ways, we had shortcomings and have learned from that. And so we're constantly sharing and updating, and also helping other organizations who are trying to do similar things in their community, and partnering with them to, further their their approach to helping their communities, but also just utilizing our resources and our networks to put other organizations in contact with folks we're working with, whether that be, how to start GoFundMe, how to, reach out to different businesses to look for donations and things like that. So I think we're definitely very transparent with our work, and definitely trying to bridge gaps across Indian country, and really avoiding defaulting to working in silos. I think we've done a really great job of that. And I think too, just going forward, one of the things we really pride ourselves on is not just being a temporary organization or mutual aid, but building out beyond that. So even within the first 2 or 3 months of starting the relief fund and doing the direct relief effort, we were already having conversations on, okay, what's our 3-year plan? What's our 5-year plan? Because these issues aren't just going to disappear, and we need to continue to work on them diligently, but also making sure that we're bringing in other people and other organizations, because the issues that we face are not going to be solved by one entity, and so just continuing to collaborate and move forward.
I hear so many inspirational points being made here on how a grassroots movement, something that starts when a problem is identified, can transform over time and truly become a pillar of the community. Shondine, I want to thank you so much today for your time. I want to thank you for sharing these stories. In my intro, I mentioned this is just one of hundreds of thousands of Navajo stories that add to our country's collective story. So thank you so much for joining me today. Times of change are hard. We see that they oftentimes push us to our limits. We learn new lessons, and we're quickly reminded of old lessons learned. As we saw today with this conversation with Shondine, the impact of COVID-19 looks and feels different depending on your situation, where you live, what access you have. Combined with the COVID-19 pandemic, we see that racial inequalities and even the lack of basic needs have magnified the hardships that all Navajo citizens are experiencing. Through activism and collaboration, we are seeing that grassroots movements are becoming the model in which to support communities and really help through this time of difficult change. We see that uplifting voices of those that are most silenced is crucial in the conversation of COVID-19. It's important to hear these voices so we can assess COVID's impact. I would like to thank NMAI's History and Culture Department, as well as the Smithsonian's 24 Hours of Change Project Committee, for allowing Shondine and I to share just one of these stories today. Thank you all and have a great day.